Let's take a look at all things around Berachain. First of all, distribution and allocation. It's a token that launches with less than the typical supply that we see in the range from 1 to 10 billion. This one comes out with only 500 million Bera tokens allocated across those 5 categories that I'm sharing on the screen right now. Initial core contributors getting 17%, 34% going to investors, 13% to community initiatives, 16 or 15.8% to be airdropped, 20% to ecosystem and R&D, which if you add all of that together, gets you to a community allocation of 49%. If we break that down a bit further, I'm not going to go through all categories, but there's a couple interesting things in there. So yes, there's an allocation for testnet users. There is a significant allocation, 2% for the RFAs, they call it RFPs, request for proposals, and successful recipients of those. The Boyko launch program, which we touched on the show, for the liquidity vaults that reach 3 billion deposits, will also get rewarded with 2% of the allocation. Then there's this interesting part of the social airdrop, which I'm going to expand on that a bit later, what that means, but definitely there's been a lot of posts on the timeline from content creators who were surprised to find that they have a Bera allocation. Then the ecosystem NFTs, we touched on them yesterday, especially as we talked about CBB, who had collected Berachain NFTs worth more than $11 million. Since this token also comes out on Binance, they are partnered up with Binance for the BNB holders, who also get 2% of the token allocation. Strategic partners, and then Bongbear's NFTs, Bongbear's NFTs and Rebases getting 6.9%. This is the part of the news which we touched on earlier when we said that NFTs basically were also pumping after those tokenomics details came out. Smokey, the Berachain founder, had something to say on the airdrop as well, saying that airdrops are all about rewarding community that helped your project win. Targeting people perfectly is nearly impossible, especially for a pre-launch product. They consider themselves quite lucky, as they had quite a few ways to show, to see who the people are who really cared, whether it was from the original Bear NFTs, dozens of NFT collections from the ecosystem, yapping on socials, building the ecosystem through RFPs, using apps on the testnet and everything in between. Again, I want to get into the yapping aspect a bit later. What I want to do first, though, is to touch on the valuation. Valuation is fluctuating quite a lot. When I prepared this before the show, we were at $7 for the tokens. Now we're up to 9.35 on Whales Market. Again, keep in mind, this is happening on rather low volume. That's 2.8 million in 24-hour volume for that, which would...
And just for context, Legendary, so a $7 valuation.
$7 would have been 3.5 bill.
3.5, because
now we are now we are closer to the $5 billion mark. We are at 4.6-ish with that. The bet we touched on yesterday, which had low volume on Polymarket, has doubled up in volume, still relatively low, 76K in that, but there seems to be a consensus. 50%, the question was Berachain FDV 1 day after launch. That's interesting to keep in mind. It's not today, it's 1 day after launch. And 50% think that this is going to be between 3 and 5 billion, between a $3 and $5 billion FDV 1 day after the launch. And then the part that I wanted to get in separately is exactly the social aspect, the yapping aspect of it, as Berachain has had, I think, one of the earliest leaderboards on Kaito for people specifically talking about Berachain to be tracked on that. And they have received 0.25% of the total token allocation. Had numerous people like Whale. I think Whale was one of the first whom I saw coming out say they get a couple hundred tokens off that. So anywhere, depending on your allocation and where the price goes, between 5K, 10K, just for having talked about Bera. And David Phelps, whose tweet, the co-founder of Jokers, whose tweet I'm sharing on screen currently, also made the point that kind of connects us to the Mega ETH stuff that we also talked about, that Berachain Mega ETH are changing the game for airdrop farmers by rewarding yappers, by rewarding people who talk about that. And I also think that from Kiter's perspective, that is super interesting, because I'm not going to extend too much into that because then we'd move too far away from Berachain. But really quick, that thought, Kaito is pre-TGE, but people are already making money. Yappers are already making money by quote unquote using Kaito. The cool thing is you don't need to do anything. You just post and have your wallet connected. Obviously, there's like the Yap selling going on, and now there's airdrops going on for just talking about the product. And that's super interesting because you reward people before you even have a token, and Kaito is paying $0 for that. It's protocols who bribe them, it's protocols who airdrop to them. Having that expectation, this is exactly what played out for Bera. They got pre-TG engagement by people who talked about them, some maybe specifically because they've also seen it on Kaito. Now they get rewarded at TG, and the timeline is full with people who, jokingly or half jokingly post, okay, now I'm a Bera Mega Bull because I got an airdrop and I talked about that. And if you scroll the timeline, you see like 4 or 5 Bera airdrop posts in a row. That is pretty impressive in terms of the mind share that they managed to get by doing that.
Yeah, very much so. I really find that social stuff super interesting. I wonder whether I just want to go to Sam straight away for your general reflections. Maybe if you want to go in the social direction or any others. Then I wanted to touch on valuation a little bit. I'm looking at the numbers. I think a lot of this stuff's locked up at the moment, but I'll take a second on that. Sam, why don't you speak to your thoughts?
I was gonna take the valuation aspect as well, just because we've spoken about pre-market prices quite significantly. I do find that it seems to be inflated, and I'm also curious as to who the buyer is of the token on the other end. So I know there was this concept of like proof of liquidity and the various honey analogies that are in the ecosystem. So if there is like beneficial like yield farming strategies and things like that, I can understand people wanting to buy the token and use it for those benefits. But that is my first like question and challenge, and that's something that I probably want to look into more before thinking that those pre-market prices are accurate. The second question is, okay, well, what happens to the NFTs, the NFT prices once the token launches? Because we saw that with Pudgies. There was an absolute cratering of the price of the NFTs as people basically took or claimed the token, dumped it, and then dumped the NFTs. So I'd be curious to see if that happens again, or whether there's such a strong community that they'll end up just keeping the NFTs for the sake of having the NFTs. Or even if there's any other benefits in the future that will kind of lead to them wanting to hold.
All good questions. I mean, you have to think that with the NFTs themselves, they're going to lose a significant amount of value. I wonder whether I can't see the detail here as to whether the NFTs will get all of those tokens all in one go. I know we've got some super knowledgeable Berachain people in the show. We've got Patrick.
I think it's 25% that unlock instantly, and the rest is vested.
25, do you say?
I think so. Yeah, let me double check that real quick.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. If you double check that, I was just going to shout out Patrick, who's listening in the audience. I've been chatting with them about the Berachain stuff. There's some super passionate Berachain people. I'm sure they know the answer. If you shoot us a comment on Twitter, you might be able to bring your comment up. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on is the token release schedule. When you're thinking about valuations for this stuff, obviously you want to know how much stuff is circulating, right? So I'm looking at this here, and this has, so remember, if you're new here, we're streaming the show on video as well. We're live on YouTube as well as to our personal profiles and the Modern Market account video if you prefer to watch in. So what you can see is the token release schedule. You've got the initial unlock, and after a 1-year cliff, a sixth of allocated tokens are unlocked. But what it looks like, so you've got 500 million tokens in total. And for the first 12 months, you have only 100 million circulating. So that's 20% will be circulating for 12 months. I think that's actually, I know people might instinctively say that's low. I think that's probably a bit higher than what people would have expected for chains, because I think sometimes people have really milked this like low float, high FDV chain launches before and been as low as maybe 10% at the beginning. Obviously, since other tokens have come to market and the people have gone much higher. Hyperliquid was much higher. And I think people are kind of encouraged to start at a lower valuation, have more supply out, and kind of build wealth with their community. So it's 20% is that number. So any thoughts on the number here then, Legendary? And just full disclosure, we have some tokens. How much did we have? I think I've shared that I have like 600 or something from the social aspect. I think Sammy, you shared you've got like 700 something. But I typically also don't trade these. So when I can feel pretty casual about throwing out valuations for these, because I know some people will be like, I need to buy the airdrop sell off in order to make the 2x or make a 1.5x something. But I typically don't do that. It pains me too much, the idea that this is a free day to get tokens, and to lose money on that day would just hurt me too much. So I prefer to trade other stuff. But any reflections here, boys?
Yeah, first of all, just a quick correction for the Bong Bears. So that's the Bong Bears and the rebase collections based on them, basically, who receive the 34.5 million Bera, split equally across those collections with 25 million tokens. That was the 25 that I remembered, which is 5% of the tokens unlocking at launch. And the remaining 9.5 million is 1.9%. They are on the vesting schedule as all the insiders, consisting of a 1-year cliff, followed by a 6th unlock, and then 24 months of linear vesting. So you unlock a good part of that initially. So basically, you have to look at it in relative numbers, like it's 6.9% in total, and 5% is unlocked initially, not 5% of the 6.9%. And to the trading thing, I'm in the same camp, honestly. I've seen so many airdrops over the last years in crypto, and most of them, with a few exceptions, follow the same pattern, that there's a massive and the protocols who remain relevant and survive see a revival phase. Typically, there was I think Miles Deutscher was the one who shared that chart at some point. Typically see this revival 6 to 9 months after the TG. So I'm happy to typically sell all of my airdrops and then just, keep track of the things I find interesting and buy in later. But I'm not too good. It's just not my skill set to swing trade airdrops on TGE day.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a risk it might do a hyperliquid though, in which case you're pretty fucked. So that's that. I'm the same with you guys. Like I don't trade airdrops, to be honest. I think like especially ones where you don't have that knowledge advantage. Like I think with the Berachain ecosystem, it's so complex and there's so many nuances to it that these guys have been in it for what is it, 2 years or 18 months that it's been going for. So there's obviously a lot of knowledge that I don't have. So to try and trade it would just be a distinct disadvantage.
Good point. Unfair advantages lead into where you have one. Take a step back when you don't have them. I think that's completely fair. Okay, interesting stuff. I think that's like a helpful summary of what's going on there.